I want to tell you about the worst phone call I ever got from someone who was trying to be kind. It was a recruiter. And to be fair to her, she wasn't trying. She spent weeks walking me through the process. Every conversation that we had was positive. Every interview seemed positive. Every person I spoke to seemed positive. But by the time she called me that day, I wasn't wondering whether I got the job. I was wondering when I was going to start. The position was with Amazon, strategic accounts. The role was helping some of their largest sellers grow their businesses. Not traditional sales, more strategy, more partnership, more consultation. The compensation, it was excellent. The kind of comp that makes you really start doing the math before you're supposed to. At the time, the position paid a base salary of about $150,000. On top of that was an annual stock grant worth roughly $50,000. Amazon was trading probably at about $160 back then, and I'll let you do the math on that one. And here's what made it feel even more certain. One of my closest friends, he already had that exact job. Not a similar job, that job. About a week before the final interview, he called me. I still remember exactly what he said. "Mario, this role is you. It may as well be called Mario," he said. Now, think about that for a second. This wasn't a recruiter trying to keep a candidate interested. This wasn't a hiring manager trying to sell me on the company. This was somebody already doing the work. Someone who understood the role better than I did. Someone who knew me well enough to understand how I'm wired, and he was convinced. Honestly, so was I. I went through 3 rounds of interviews. The recruiter, she loved me. The hiring manager, the same. That manager even told me that if the decision were his alone, he'd hire me immediately. The only thing left was what Amazon calls the loop. So for those who aren't familiar with it, the loop is essentially a gauntlet. Interview after interview, 4 hours, different people, different departments, different perspectives, different priorities. So I did like most candidates. I prepared. I studied. I took notes. I rehearsed answers. I did everything you're supposed to do. And when it was over, I felt good, really good. Now, I'm not trying to be arrogant, nor was I overconfident. I just felt really good. The way you feel when you've done your homework and you know you represented yourself well. Then my phone rang. Of course, I was nervous, but the recruiter, I could tell at the other end something was wrong. The recruiter sounded disappointed before she even started talking. That's how I knew. No offer, no next step, no explanation, just no. So I asked if there was any feedback, anything I could improve upon, anything that I could learn from. Nothing. The bar raiser hadn't approved me. Decision made. Process over. Just done. That's where the story should actually end. At least that's how it would end for most people who tell this story. You get rejected, you learn a lesson, you bounce back, everybody applauds. End of story. But that's not what happened. What happened was I got angry. Not devastated, not heartbroken, just angry. Actually, I wasn't angry. I was probably more upset. But because I genuinely believed the job was mine. Not because I felt entitled to it, but because every signal I received pointed in that direction. Maybe you've experienced something similar, a promotion perhaps, a business opportunity, a house, relationship perhaps, a dream you've already started living in your head. That's how I felt. Then all of a sudden, one conversation changes everything. And suddenly, the future you've been mentally rehearsing disappears. What I remember most isn't the phone call, it's what happened afterwards. I had to start telling people, family, friends, colleagues, people who knew I was interviewing, people who kept asking, how is it going? People who were excited for me. It was a new chapter in my life. But that's not the part everybody talks about. Losing privately is one thing. Explaining the loss publicly is something entirely different. Because every conversation starts with the same question. So what happened? And the truth is, I didn't know. I had no explanation because I hadn't been given one. For a few days, I did what most people do. I replayed everything in my head, every interview, every answer, every note, trying to find the mistake, trying to identify the moment where somehow I'd stepped on a landmine without realizing it was there. But eventually, I reached the frustrating conclusion. You can't fix what's broken if nobody's willing to tell you what's broken. And that's when my wife did what she's done for many years. She gave me the perspective. She said, maybe the job simply wasn't God's plan for me. Now, the truth is, those words did bring me some peace. Faith has carried me through the much harder things than a job interview. But I still was looking for an explanation. I still wanted to know what happened. I still wanted somebody to point to that exact thing and just say, there, that's why. But life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the answer isn't available when you need it most. Sometimes the answer only shows up years later. So what did I do? I went back to work. Wasn't inspired, not grateful, not enlightened. I was just irritated. So there I was back at Yelp, still carrying the frustration, still wondering what might have been, still seeing the Amazon compensation package every time I closed my eyes. And then yet something happened, not all at once, not dramatically, slowly. The way most important things tend to happen. Around that time, I inherited an accounting firm. I won't name the name because I'm going to give you some of the details. But he had 6 locations across the United States. He had a decent spend, nothing unusual. But what caught my attention wasn't the account, it was the notes. So I rolled through, scanned all the notes on the account, years worth of data. Different salespeople, different attempts, different strategies. Nobody could ever reach the owner. Every call was ignored, went to voicemail. Every email was ignored. Year after year after year, nobody could get through. So the more I read, the more curious I became. Because when something doesn't make sense, I have a hard time letting it go. So I started thinking about it. Not how everyone else had approached it, how I could approach it. I like to think that I come up with different ideas. So I did. I had a simple one. Maybe even a little silly if you think about it. I sent an email, just like everybody else. Nothing groundbreaking though, nothing clever. But at the bottom of that email was my title, Director. A few minutes later, I got a notification that he had opened it. And shortly after that one came the reply. 3 words. Let's talk. When? And that's where things started to get interesting. So we got on a phone call. We had a great conversation. And eventually he told me why he responded. What he had said was, it wasn't the email itself. It wasn't the offer. It wasn't the timing. It was the title. He said he couldn't believe that a director had been assigned to this account. And that's what got his attention. That's what made him respond. Now here's where the story matters. Back then, he had 6 locations. His advertising budget was about $6,000 a month. Today, he has 20 locations, and his advertising budget is roughly 10 times what it was when we first spoke. We've worked together for years now, not because I sold him something, because I built a relationship. And looking back, I realized something. The thing that excited me wasn't managing the account. It was figuring him out. It was problem solving. Finding the angle nobody else had considered. Opening a door everyone else had walked through in the past. Meanwhile, life keeps moving as it always does. The anger I felt about Amazon started to fade. Not because I got answers, but because I got busy. There's something interesting about disappointment. When you're sitting still, it gets louder. When you keep moving forward, it slowly loses its grip. I stopped replaying the interviews. Stopped trying to identify the invisible mistake. Stopped trying to solve a mystery I knew that I could never solve. And I started focusing on the things that I could actually influence, the clients that were in front of me, the opportunities in front of me, the work in front of me, not the opportunity that had already been passed. There's a lesson in all that by itself. A lot of people spend years arguing with closed doors, trying to understand them, trying to relive them, trying to negotiate with decisions that have already been made. The problem is, while you're staring at the closed door, you're not seeing the open ones that are right next to it. So, and in my case, there were plenty of open doors. I just hadn't noticed them yet. That year became the best year of my entire career. For nearly 2 decades between AT&T and Yelp, my best year had been roughly around $150,000. That was what I thought my ceiling was. That year, after Amazon said no to me, I crossed the $200,000 mark for the first time in my life. Not barely, comfortably. And I even had a month where I roughly sold about $117,000 in commission or in sales. And that month alone, I got paid $25,000 in compensation. Now, I want to be careful here because this is not a story about money. Money is just the easy way to measure things. But the real story is about perspective. Because every one of those wins happened in the place I thought I had outgrown, the place I was trying to leave, the place I was secretly treating like a consolation prize. And then something else happened. Something I could not have known when I got that phone call. About 60 days after I was rejected, Amazon called all their employees back to the office. So remember, this was after COVID. I'd got used to working remotely. My wife and I spend a lot of time together. We enjoy it. We're both in the house every day together. And one of the expected gifts of this season of my life is that we actually like being together. I know that sounds obvious, but spend enough time around married couples and you'll discover that's normally not the way that it is. Working from home had become part of a life that we'd built together, part of the rhythm we built, part of the future we were planning. Had I gotten that job, the future would have changed almost immediately. And then there was my friend. He left Amazon. He actually left twice. He left, came back, and then went somewhere else again. At one point, he told me the role just wasn't for him. And every time we talked, I found myself thinking about something. Maybe the rejection wasn't as simple as I thought it was. Maybe Amazon made a mistake. I still think that's possible. In fact, if I'm being honest, I think I would have been really good at that job. But I don't think that's arrogance. I think it's experience. I know what I'm good at. I know that I would have succeeded there. But that's where the story gets interesting. Because being capable of something and being built for something, they aren't always the same thing. Years later, I started looking at that role a little bit differently. The job was helping successful sellers become even more successful, managing momentum, guiding momentum, supporting momentum, and that's valuable work. But when I look back over my life, that's never been really my thing. I've always been a builder, a hunter. When my wife and I were young, we didn't have much. We'd drive around neighborhoods, looking at houses we couldn't afford. I mean, we knew that. Someday, though, we thought. That's when we'd say, someday. When I started businesses, someday. When I went back to school, someday. When I moved across the states, someday. When I started this channel at 57 years old, someday. That's always been the pattern. Not because I was chasing the money, not because I was chasing status, because I've always loved the pursuit. That's building. That's possibility. The moment something exists that didn't exist before, and somewhere along the way I realized something, the job I didn't get was built for someone who enjoys managing momentum. The life I've built has been shaped by creating it. That's different wiring. The rejection felt so confusing at the time. It started making a little bit more sense now. Not because somebody finally explained it, because life did. And that's often how it works. We think that we need answers. What we really need is just time. Enough time for the story to finish unfolding. Enough time to see consequences. enough time to see opportunities, enough time to understand what we couldn't understand in the moment. Looking back now, I think that Amazon made the right decision. I think I would have been good at that job though, but I also think accidentally redirected me toward a life that was a better fit for me. Both things can be true, and maybe that's the part worth remembering. The rejection that you've been carrying around all these years, the one you still don't understand, the one that still bothers you a little when you think about it, maybe it wasn't proof that you weren't good enough. Maybe it was simply a chapter of the story that hadn't revealed its purpose yet. The question I want to leave you with today: what's the rejection in your life that still doesn't make sense? And if enough time has passed, what did it actually make possible? Sit with that for a little bit. So I'm Mario. This channel is unfinished. It's for men who aren't done becoming. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week.